Kat Kollett, very flower. I like it.
I'm in the pants competition.
You are in the pants competition, okay. You now have Kalev, Jessica, and Kat in the pants competition. There will be voting later. Kat is the senior director of our strategy groups. She came to us just a couple years ago, has really pushed us into customer experience, employee experience, makes us think about things in a different way, always has a very interesting and thoughtful point of view, I will say, in the lunchroom of all places, usually is where her best thoughts come out.
It is. Yeah, it is.
All right, take it away, Kat.
Hi, everybody. Chaos Muppet. Tell by my hairstyle. I am going to talk about empathy today and how it might be we might use it to bring a sense of calm in this space of chaos, the chaos that I love. So when we invited you here, this is very explicitly in the invitation. We said, hey, come with us to Palm Springs. We're going to embrace ambiguity. We're going to celebrate the beauty of uncertainty, and we're going to find the joy in chaos. Fun. Yes. For some people. Mm-hmm. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to do with you what I'm going to talk about. First thing, I'm going to constrain chaos. Kalev, don't worry, I'm not going to try to control it, but I am, with Jessica's input, creating a better brief for my own self. I'm going to do it very explicitly. We all have done it for this day, but I'm going to do it explicitly right here. Here's a little bit of a sneak peek. We're going to talk about overwhelm and what that means, what it looks like, and then we're going to bring in that empathy that I was talking about. We're going to follow that up with a new way to think about experience design, and then take a little bit of a flight of fancy, try to imagine the future, and we'll wrap it up with how we might be able to use chaos really powerfully in our businesses. So let's get started. First, we're going to constrain that chaos. So when you think of the word chaos, dictionary definition, anarchy. That is not what we're here to talk about. I don't have a lot that I can say about it, not much I think I can do about it. So let's dial it back a little bit, and maybe we can consider overwhelm instead. It's a little bit easier to think about. Overwhelm has a couple different variations. So one of them is good overwhelm. Too much love, too much gratitude, too much candy. Maybe not a problem, maybe not something worth really thinking about. But bad overwhelm, on the other hand, is something that we might want to put a stop to. Thank goodness this is an AI-generated image. I'm glad nobody was standing this close to a tidal wave ever. That would be terrible. I'm actually going to dial this back one more step and talk specifically about information overload. And so there are a couple of reasons for that. The primary one being One North is a digital agency. I'm actually qualified to talk about this. So it's the version of chaos, the version of overwhelm that we're going to talk about for the next half hour. Okay, so let's talk about that overwhelm. Again, information overload. So what overwhelm looks like, so this is the factors that might contribute to someone experiencing overwhelm. Number one, scope, so the volume that they might need to take in. And so this is not literally data necessarily. This could also be tasks that need to be completed. It could be any number of things, but it's easiest to think about literal data that you're trying to take in. It's both the volume of it and then also the complexity, which of course is dependent upon your level of expertise, but the complexity and how that affects your ability to process it. Second, opacity, so the ability that you have to verify that the information you're taking in is true. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then finally, urgency. So how quickly you need to process the information. So if you think about someone actually making choices in the face of like terminal illness, not to bring us down, but that actually brings a lot of urgency to it. And it is also complex information. The medical field is actually a really great place to think about overwhelm and the kinds of things people might be working through with these three in particular. And then there's the fourth hidden factor, which is emotional load. And this can really be anything. It is anything happening in a person's life, whether it's related to their current context or not. It's in the background, maybe in the foreground. I mean, it definitely has an effect on their experience overall. Okay, so I'm going to dial in a little bit on scope and opacity just for a second. So scope, we all know that information is growing exponentially. We've seen a couple graphs with this exact same shape this morning already. This one is about the volume of data in the world. It's growing exponentially, got that upward curve. Interestingly, this graph was generated in 2020, 21, I think. So it doesn't include the advent of Gen AI as we know it right now. So it's wrong. The numbers on the right would be much, much, much higher. Also, when I saw this, I had never heard of a zettabyte. Who here has heard of a zettabyte? Do you know what a zettabyte is? I mean, the answer's right on the slide. But, so it's 10 to the 21st power, so one with 21 zeros, that's a lot. It's 1 trillion gigabytes. And again, this is like small, 181 zettabytes is like a small estimate. We all love a good book recommendation. I pulled this one from my 8-year-old's bookshelf. Scale is hard for people to comprehend. Big numbers are really, really hard to think about, kind of mind-blowing very quickly. 100 billion trillion stars is the estimated number of stars in the universe. And just to put a point on this, the amount of data that is, again, that wrong, low amount of data that exists today is a factor of 10,000 higher than the number of stars in the universe. So that's a lot. It's a lot of data. Okay, we'll talk about opacity for a second. So figuring out if something is true is really difficult. This is actually a cartoon from 1993, I think. This was sort of the advent of the internet. And people realized, hey, it's really hard for people to know who I am. Like, you can kind of be anyone, do anything on the internet, because your identity is a little bit hidden. That changed. So over the course of the last 20 years, having your identity known, having things associated with you has become very important. So it's not quite as easy to hide anymore. But the thing is that we now have cyber dogs generating data at an incredible pace. And it's really hard to know, well, some of it's not so hard to tell, but it's really hard to know the source of all the information that we're seeing. There's more and more and more of it. This guy's pretty cute, right? He's not quite as menacing looking as Spot from Boston Dynamics, but I think that's actually maybe part of the point, right? Like, they don't seem necessarily nefarious. Okay, so those are the two factors I talked more about. I'm not going to go into the other three, but it's important to know that information overload happens to everyone, and that means even your customers and your employees, and yes, while interacting with or on behalf of you. It's everywhere. Everyone experiences it. Good news, though. So particularly in the space of scope, opacity, and urgency, and a little bit in the emotional load space, these are all things around which we can offer support in a variety of ways. And that's where empathy comes in. So we all know sort of that common definition of empathy, this ability to understand and maybe feel with another person. That's actually not the kind of empathy we're going to be talking about here. We're going to take a sort of a more clinical version of it, so cognitive empathy. And this is important. It gives us a little bit of distance. It's not that you need to take in the feelings of the other person, but you definitely need to understand them, perceive them, understand them. And this is the distance from which and the connection with that allows us to really try to make a difference for people. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with them. It doesn't necessarily even mean that we have to be able to help, but we have the right context to at least think about it, consider it, and figure out what the best path forward is. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what happens to people when they're experiencing that bad overwhelm. So the first thing they might do is ignore it. We're going to hide our head in the sand for a little bit. And at some point, we're going to have to dig in, right? So we have to engage. We might be reluctant about it, but we will take that first step forward. And then when we're in it, we're going to hope for a quick resolution. Great, so how can we help? How can we use this empathy to alleviate that sense of overwhelm? I've got 4 things that we can do here. So one is around that customer experience. So how do we design interactions that really have users' needs in mind, address their concerns in a very straightforward and simple way? The second is through employee enablement. Make sure that our employees have the tools and the context they need to support the customers in the way that works best for them and as quickly as possible. Sometimes even ahead of the customer understanding that they have a need. The third one I'm going to actually give an example in this one because it really was brought home for me recently at a conversation over dinner. So giving employees the support they need to bring their best selves to work. This one, I was having dinner with a friend who happens to be a pediatrician, and she works in pediatric emergency care. So you can imagine this might be a bit of a overwhelming career to have. But she mentioned, you step into a room with a family, and they're kind of in the middle of a bad time, and you need to support them with everything that you have. But what they can't possibly know, and what you might not have had time to process, is that 2 minutes ago, you were with another family in a different room, and they were having the worst day of their lives, and you were right there with them, having to support them, and there was no break. There was no time. Now, that's a drastic version of this, but it happens all the time to our employees, especially those who interact with our customers. It happens all the time, and they really need that space to be their best selves. And then finally, continual adaptation. So this is really a very specific version of employee enablement. It's also it's enablement for your organization. So this is the research. It's that behind-the-scenes work that we do in support of the other three, but to really continually learn about our employees, our customers, and apply what we've learned to meet their needs in new ways. Okay. Well, yeah. I am. These are just the best practices in experience design, so nothing new yet. Let's press on, wait for it. We'll talk about fractal experience design for diverging needs. So what does this mean? Well, first of all, let's talk about that. Just like heuristics, overwhelm is personal. It's impossible to know for any given person whether scope, opacity, urgency, emotional load, which one is troubling them, or if it's some combination of these. And if it's more than one, they all compound each other. I mean, also on the right, what's a good tech talk without a Tolstoy quote? Yeah? Yeah? The good news is that the very same technologies that we're right now pointing at, the Gen AI, all these things, that are contributing to our overwhelm are the very same that can be used to alleviate it. So until now, what we've been doing is producing, personas, right? So we produce archetypes of our users, our employees, and we address their needs. That's great. So we're hitting on potentially it's at least a subset of their needs, and potentially even a really big subset, but it's not all of them. And with something, like with these emerging technologies, my thought is that we can actually start to address everyone's needs in a very specific, personalized way. It's almost like hyper-personalization. So what does that mean? Let's take a look at what I mean when I say these emerging technologies. This is where we're going to lean into that intelligence part of AI. So I'm going to talk about 4 specifically here. I'm going to talk at a very high level. Mostly because my technology days are behind me, but I understand more or less what they do. So machine learning, this ability for us to continually take in information about our customers, our employees, collect it, process it, understand new things about them. So building out an incredibly rich and ever-evolving profile for each of them. Natural language processing, so this ability to understand in the person we're interacting with, in their language, what they mean, what they need, as opposed to asking them to take on our vocabulary and tell us what we need in the way that we want to hear it. We combine this with oh gosh, now I've lost the word. The thing that can actually pick up your language, language recognition, right? Yeah, voice recognition. That's what it is, voice recognition. And then yeah, right. Then we're really talking, and I mean that literally. So predictive analytics, this ability for us to take in these, this big data. We've been collecting it for a really long time now. How can we start to use it to take a look at a situation, context that a current user, customer, employee is in, and predict what might be best for them next? It's not necessarily going to be the answer, but we can take a pretty good guess. And then finally, Gen AI. So this is actually on this list the only one that's really new. These other 3 have been around for decades, but Gen AI is the latest and greatest. And it is this, this idea we all know, right? This idea that we can generate large amounts of content based on other content that we already have. So this is great because it means we can make lots and lots of variations on content that we already have, and we can put it in different voices, and we can make it accessible to different groups of people. Okay, so with all of this, what I'm saying is that we will have the ability, or we do have the ability to deliver these really differentiated, context-sensitive experience based on exactly how our users are interacting with us, based on every little thing that they do. I'm going to take a little side trip here. So, Ben talked about the diversity of background that we have at One North, so me too. My undergraduate degree is mathematics, which is fun. I think at this point, all that qualifies me for it. No, I did start a PhD program, did not finish it. Don't love math the way you need to love math to get an advanced degree in it. It's fine. So I think all that qualifies me as right now as a math nerd. It's fine. I prefer the term math evangelist. And so I was so, I picked this fractal experience design as something I just kind of came up with. And then Kollett pointed out to me, he's like, fractals are really actually the perfect metaphor for what you're talking about. And I thought about that for a second. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so right. So that's great because all of a sudden I have all this beautiful artwork for my deck. Every single one of the breaker slides is a generated fractal. Found this really cool application online and started generating what are called Julia sets. So everything you see around the edge here, the 8, except for it's not really the middle because of the way they're positioned, but the ones around the edge, those are all Julia sets. And the thing that's really, really interesting about them, I did read about this because my math brain's a little dusty, trying to figure out this is not going to be actually accurate, but it's the best I can do, simple terms, high level. It's the same function, iterated on, so it's really more of an algorithm, Each one of those diagrams is generated by the same algorithm. The only difference is that there are two variables that are inserted into it, and that makes all the difference in the world. So this is what chaos theory looks like in mathematics. That middle diagram is the Mandelbrot set. It's a little bit more of a household name in fractals. I mean, I have a nerdy household, but anyway, so that's the Mandelbrot set. And what it is the collection of all of the numbers in the complex plane, the ones inside it where the dark red is, all the ones that make these beautiful diagrams. Everything outside of it just goes kind of to dust. Little fun fact about the Mandelbrot set. So it has a finite area. Cool. The perimeter of it, infinite in length. Whoa. Kind of neat. But back to our experiences. So we talked about fractal experience design as being able to alleviate, really for the most part, scope and opacity. I guess I didn't point that out on the slide. So I've got these little circles on the right and on the bottom here. That really helps in the space of scope and opacity. Urgency and emotional load, what happens to those? Well, last year at Assembly, I gave a talk about returning to human. And it was really about, I said that the next era in technology is the era of intuition. And all these technologies, the same technologies that we're talking about, are the kinds of things that create space for people. So they're the kinds of things that can do a lot of the background work and produce a lot of information to support people in the work that they need to do, leaving space for them to interact with each other as humans. It's the support work that can happen that gives them what they need to meet people where they are as a human being. We have to protect that time that we can get back by using all of this technology. But if we do, what it means is space for addressing people who are experiencing high urgency around something, and particularly for helping people who are under an extreme amount of emotional load, emotional overload, perhaps, right? So it's where we can find our best selves, our humanness, and meet our customers and help them, or our employees. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a flight of fancy. This is going to be abstract. The easiest situation to think about is commerce, just because it's a fairly simple use case. But you can really apply what I'm about to share to pretty much any business situation. You can just map it onto your own world. That'll be great. So what if engagement for our customers felt like just a conversation? It could literally be a conversation. So this could be digital, it could be interpersonal. But what if it felt like a conversation with someone who really got you, who really learned about you, who really listened to you, who understood you, provided information that you need and proved to you that it was accurate, structured it in a way that they knew that you could understand it easily, with sensitivity to what was happening for you in your life right now, and a level of detail that works for you, that's aligned with what you already know. That would be incredible. What if your employees, behind the scenes, what if they had dynamic tools? This would really support them in the interpersonal version of the first slide, that gave them really, really highly relevant contextual information to support them in whatever they were doing with you and however they were interacting with you and the information that they were sharing with you. If those tools could actually listen real time for change in the context and could provide new information and new insights that you could then use to help them in a better and better and better way. What if their work, your employees, what if you were supporting them by giving them work that really reinforced their own sense of value by allowing them to engage in those more human-oriented tasks? So this is that space where we're returning to human and getting people back to sort of the essence of what it means. We're not doing sort of more data-oriented tasks anymore. What if the way that we supported them was by including the time that they needed so that they could do their best work? So give them that space to breathe, that space to recover. And what if, even beyond that, we had a way to assign work, get work to the people based on where their expertise lied or where their interests were, or basically in the ways that matched what their skills were and what their goals were. And finally, what if behind the scenes we were supporting our research process with automated synthesis of themes from across all the input and feedback that we're getting, and then we're able to initiate strategic exploration based on the most persistent themes so we can understand what these are very easily and go out and learn more and figure out how we can address those concerns. And above all, and this has nothing to do with technology, but maintaining that culture of curiosity, finding those big and small changes that we can make to really transform the way that we serve other people. So these are the same four that we shared earlier in the presentation, but they take on a whole new meaning when you think about this fractal experience design. All of a sudden, all four of these can be transformational. It can make a whole new world available to us, to our employees, and to our customers. Just like that, chaos is canceled. Confident. Okay, but wait a second. Well, isn't this going to be a lot of work, and particularly the customer and the employee experience? Like, what are we really talking about here? It does seem like it. Remember that perimeter is infinite. Well, my thought on this is that if we have a few variations on a couple of different things, we'll have a powerful basis to produce exactly these kinds of experiences. Again, the easiest one to think about is content, but this can apply in a couple different ways. What I have up here is a pretty standard, very, very high level journey for a customer. So the 5 E's, love that framework. It's a great place to start if you don't know much more yet. And on the left, I have these 3 levels of competency. So the novice, someone who's fairly competent, and then the expert. And when we think about the way that one of our customers or employees really interact with us, it could be that they're coming in and having a pretty straightforward journey. They might kind of come in as a novice, learn a few things, and then they're gone, and that's fine. Those aren't the customers we love, but okay. Or they could have an experience more like this, where they come in, they spend some time with us, they learn something, they think about leaving, and then they come on right back and they learn something in a little bit more depth, and then they move on. Again, it's high level, I know it's very abstract, but. And finally, there could be someone who's actually already an expert, and they come in and then they have to learn about us, so they go back up to a novice about us, but then they bring their expertise, and they might fluctuate a lot between novice, competent, and expert as they interact with what it is that we have to offer, and eventually extend, maybe exit. I mean, we love it when they kind of stay in that middle E for a really, really, really long time, but this is how we draw journeys. And there are a million other variations on this, like maybe one for every single human being that we might be supporting. The other things that we might want to think about in there are a medium that people might want to interact with us with, and also accessibility needs. But the point is, if you create a couple different variations, I don't know how many, it really depends on you. There might be some sub-journeys where you want to take a little bit of a deeper dive, but we create some number of variations on what we have available, and basically let all those technologies we talked about earlier start to create a dynamic experience for our users. You might even call it technology starting to improvise for us to provide those fractal experiences. So chaos is a catalyst. The point here is the chaos. It points us to the best opportunities to make a difference for other people. So this could be big chaos, it could be little chaos, it could be personal chaos. Big chaos could be something like a weather event, it could be a natural disaster, something like a supply chain interruption, anything that really has us rethink, or our customers really rethink what they need from us. Pretty extreme. It could be the little chaos. So that could be something like just not having the information you need, or having to go to a lot of different places to understand what it is you're supposed to do next, not knowing how to take in all of the tasks that are in front of you, figure out which one's most important. It could look like something like that. And then there's that personal chaos. So that could be something like you just had a traumatic event. There could be a life inflection point that you're going through, and all of a sudden you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, your life's feeling a little bit chaotic. It could even be something like being invited to a conference where you have to look, I don't know, professional, maybe a little bit creative, and kind of like badass in 100-degree weather. So chaos looks like all things, but the point is, it's inspiration for innovation. And this is the joy. We'll come back to that first slide. This is the joy available in chaos. It points us to new ways to be of service, and that, all of us who are in the service industry, is what we're here for. It's what brings us incredible satisfaction. So get out there, be a chaos hunter. It can only lead to beautiful things. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kat.
Yeah.
Any questions? I'm going to pick on somebody then. So,
You don't have to.
Jen Katz. Yes. Been quiet all day. You were not quiet last night, though. When we were talking, so Jen represents HR at Caterpillar, and we're talking about employee support, employee experience, I think has really come to the forefront since COVID, right? Like the stress that's put on our employees, how it affects things. I'm just kind of curious the lens that you come from Caterpillar and in your role.
Okay, well, thanks for putting me on the spot there.
No pressure.
It's all right. I'll lean in. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this resonated in terms of certainly, I mean, I naturally dial in more to the empathy as an antidote. Like, I like that even just framing of it. It's not something we talk a lot about in our culture. So I would say that we don't like over-index on allowing a lot of room for that. And something I've been at CAT only for, I'm coming up on 2 years. So it's been something that I've really worked very hard to be intentional about bringing to like my team, and the team I lead and support from an HR perspective is our digital organization. So stereotypically, don't lean really hard into kind of that human people. I mean, they're great people, but you know what I mean, like in terms of just more of that engineering mindset and just different. And so I like that it's given me some language to also, go back with. And I think that I loved, and I wrote down, I loved the way that you kind of reframed the cognitive empathy, because it does create that distance. So I don't know if people are familiar with strength finders in here. If you are, my number one strength is empathy. And my boss, it hits like 32 out of 36. So we had, but we've had this really great ongoing dynamic where he's like, it's all good. You bring the empathy for the team and we're good. But I've worked so much to kind of slowly in doses, like model that and teach that to them. And they are embracing that. And so I think, and one of the things that we're looking at is like, how do we build more of that in to the employee experience? And part of our huge focus from a customer experience perspective, I think it feels a little bit like a stretch maybe today for them to think about their customers empathetically. But I think that there's a link there in terms of like, how do we understand them from that lens to then help inform how we do our work. So I just appreciated that thread.
Thank you. I'm actually going to pick on one more person then. So Alex, not snacks yet though. Plenty of time. No, we're on a roll.
Okay.
I'm going to pick on Alex from Princess Polly. So only because Jen mentioned customer empathy and I was surprised. So can you just give 2 seconds about what Princess Polly is for everybody to provide context first?
Yeah, hi everyone. Alex Kollett, Senior Director of Operations at Princess Polly. It's a digitally native fashion Gen Z apparel brand based in Australia, but opened an operation here in the US in 2019, went public in 2021, and well, we're just having our exponential growth phase now. So very exciting stuff, yeah. And I did write down a lot on kind of this idea of overwhelm. I think, in my area, right, we look at the customer experience and what we can do on the back end to support the journey. And there's so much chaos that happens in the back end that you want to prevent the customer from seeing, but more importantly, looking at it from our employees' lens of, all right, well, if our employees are feeling overwhelmed, then our customers are also going to feel overwhelmed. So how do we address that internally? And in the last presentation too, I love looking at a diversity of our team members, and I think that always helps to impact those that may be feeling overwhelmed in one area that can lean on support from others in maybe their times of struggle. I myself, and this ties right into the last presentation, I'm a former professional figure skater. So I actually have the sports background and apply all of that knowledge to business and what I do now. And so that alone has helped me in navigating what we're trying to do at Princess Polly in so many ways, and working through and mitigating the risk of overwhelm.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Alex. All right. Snack time, snacks, coffee out. Oh, Derek Wilkinson. Thank you. Rising to the occasion.
This might be a softball question. Kat, but you talked about anticipating the employees' needs, and I'm just curious, like, how can user research support that? Because you kind of need to know what the user's needs are before you can provide a solution for it. So I'm just curious, like, how that comes into play.
Yeah. So I mean, for all of it, right? Research is going to be key to all of it. It's spending that time understanding where those frustrations lie for the employees. When I think about what employees, specifically those ones who are serving customers directly, there's a whole range of employees, but the ones who are serving customers directly, spending time and asking, well, when do you feel caught? When do you feel like if you had just like one more piece of information, you could help them more quickly? When is it that you feel like you're passing them on to somebody else and maybe you shouldn't be? Like if you just had like I don't even know what the thing would be, right? It's so specific to the individual employee. But that research, of course, is critical. So just understanding not when the work is going well, but when are they feeling like things are a little bit chaotic? When are they feeling like a little bit frazzled or a little frenzied or like trying to kind of, I don't know, dance fast, right? So when are they tap dancing? When are they kind of shuffling papers and trying to figure out what that answer is? Those are going to be the things that point us to opportunities to possibly bring in some new capabilities that can really support them in those moments.